Так, вітаю всіх. Мене звати
And
Марія,
everyone, my name is Maria,
і сьогодні я буду
and
вести
today
цю подію.
I will be moderating our
Так, я
discussion.
зараз представляю аналітичний центр
I would
Cedos,
I represent
який
Cedos Analytical Center.
власне пов'язаний з
Our project is
внесенням
related
коштів
with
до проєктів відновлення, і це такий
reconstruction and recovery
сьогодні
projects.
старт.
Today we start
Старт великого проєкту,
our big
задіяний
project,
і за
which is
підтримки
aimed at interaction
Європейського
and
Союзу
which
і
is
зокрема
organized with the
власне
support
Латвії, Польщі
of
і
Sweden, Poland,
та Словенії
Denmark,
з
Slovenia,
фінансуванням
and other
цієї
European countries through You
програми.
Lead with
Ми
Europe
маємо
program.
серію
We start a
подій
series
щодо
of
партиципації в
events
громадах
about
і
participation in
в
communities
контексті власне
within the
створення
context of
місцевих програм
creating
відновлення.
local recovery
Сьогодні ми з вами
programs.
поговоримо
Today, we will
про
talk with you
комунікації,
about
інформування
communication,
та прозорість,
informing, and
і які
transparency
власне є ключовими такими запоруками
that are the key
посилення комунікації в
preconditions for
громадах.
strengthening community interaction
Першим
and
кроком
participation. This is a
початком
first step
піраміди
on
піраміди
our
інформаційної
way to the
участі
pyramid of
громад.
involvement, engagement,
Я
of
дуже вдячна
decision-making
вам за те,
processes in the
що ви
communities.
доєдналися
I'm really
до
grateful to
нас
all of you
і
for joining us
записали
today,
настрій
for
поговорити
spending your
про
time coming here to talk with us
комунікацію
about
і
communication,
розгалуження.
informing,
І
and
також запрошую
engagement.
вас приєднатися до наступних подій.
I also invite you to join our further
Спікерка,
events. I'm really grateful to our speakers who joined us today. They will share their experience with us,
якими ви зможете
and you will be
обмінятися
able to
думками
exchange
і
with them your thoughts and
можливо у вас
opinions after the end of the presentations. Maybe some of you would also like to share the experience.
такі ключові речі.
First of all, I would like to tell you a couple of
Нам сьогодні
home rules. Today with us, we work with the simultaneous
ви
interpreters.
можете
Therefore,
налаштувати
you can
українську мову
use
або
interpretation into Ukrainian or into
англійський
English.
переклад. So we are working with translators, so if you need if you need translation, you can turn on English. It is in the screen down with the earth. Yeah, so you can turn on the English translation. Yeah, great. So let's start. Так, отже, розпочинаємо.
Okay, we can start. Let me suggest that we introduce each other in the chat. Please write down your name, which community or institution you represent, and you can also mention which important topics you would like to raise during the discussion today.
Тобто, щоб ми з вами познайомилися в чаті.
So let us introduce each other in the chat.
Хтось в чаті зможе обмінятися
Maybe some of you would like to exchange contacts in the chat as well. And right now, we would like to tell you more about our project, to explain what it will be about, and to tell you more about what we will be talking today. Let me give it over to Ivan Verbitsky, Director of Cedos. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see all of you here today. I understand that it might be very difficult for you to join us because you might have bad connection or no electricity. So if you fail to be with us during the entire time of the presentation, of course, we will have a recording of this session and we will send it over to you later. You will be able to watch it later. In any case, we really value your presence here despite all the circumstances that surround us. Despite everything, we see that the processes of recovery, after so much destruction, after so many things that are happening to our communities, to our cities and villages all over Ukraine because of this war, they have already started. Of course, some of the buildings are destroyed or damaged, but they need to continue to function. That is why the topic of recovery in many communities is very important. It has already been happening at the national level. We, as an organization that believes that participation of everyone is important because everyone has to have their say in decision-making process. This is an important value for our country. This is related to the value of dignity. We don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to involve everyone in the decision-making process. That is why this is a great honor for us to cooperate with you, Lead with Europe. This project is aimed at helping Ukrainian communities to better organize processes of community engagement, participation, engaging different people who live in the communities and can take part in recovery processes. We are very happy to see all of you here today. This is the first event out of the series of 6 workshops. I would like to tell you more about it, how these processes of participation will look like, and what needs to be taken into account. This series of events will be happening every second Thursday, same hour. That is why we welcome you to join us in 2 weeks' time. This first event is dedicated to communication and transparency. It seems to us that this is the basis, the most important thing which will facilitate other processes and techniques of participation. We hope that you will get to know more about what we do. And I would also like to announce that we are moving forward within our project. We do hope that next month we'll be able to start the process of interaction with the communities. We will announce that we are looking for communities we will cooperate with within this project. So if you are a representative of a community and you are interested in working practically with us, engaging your community members, we urge you to follow our announcements, follow our news in our pages in social media. Very soon we will share with you information about the opportunities for all the communities. Thank you once again for joining us. I wish you a productive discussion today. So Maria, I give it over to you. Ivan, thank you so much. So I see that there are a lot of messages in the chat. People are introducing themselves, and we can continue. I see that there are representatives of many regions of Ukraine, the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. There are also representatives of Volyn, representatives of Cedos, students, and many others. Please continue introducing yourself, presenting your projects and exchange contacts. I would like to add that our next events will be dedicated to concrete topics related to recovery and engagement. Our next event will be dedicated to documents that are being developed in order to start the process of recovery, to get city planning documentation, funding, plans and projects of recovery. That is why please join us and we will talk about it in more detail next Thursday. Today we will talk with you about informing, communication in different areas at different levels. Today with us, we have Anastasia Pustova. She will tell us more about strategic communication, interaction between different actors at different level of the decision-making process at the national as well as local level. We also have with us Yana Tchaikovska. Yana will tell us more about the project which is called Small Rivers of Vinnytsia Oblast. She will tell us about cooperation of the City Development Office that we can communicate with when implementing urban development projects, cooperating with different actors at the level. We also have with us our colleague Rudolf. He will tell us more about how to he will tell us more about city planning documentation, and he will tell us about how we can translate the challenging language of city planning to the general public, how we can tell them about what we do. Rudolf cooperates with Chernivtsi and with many other communities in Ukraine within cooperation with the GIZ. And we also have with us Katerina Tsabenko. She will tell us about open data and will share her experience working in the UK. She will raise many important questions about accessibility of data. I hope that it will be very important to us. So you can exchange your experience. So this is what is happening right now in your communities at the local level, cooperation with the local authorities and communication that you do as representatives of local government. We will have 4 presentations. Each of them will last for 20 minutes. And then after the presentations, you will have the opportunity to ask a question. If you have a question or comment during the presentation, you can write it in the chat. And then later, I will collect all of the messages, or you will have such an opportunity after the presentations. And now let me suggest that we start. And first, I would like to give it over our first speaker, Anastasia Pustova, co-founder of Bureau of Strategic Supervision and Director on Strategic Communication on your Family Doctor project. Anastasia, over to you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can hear me and see my presentation. Thank you so much for the invitation to take part in this event to talk to people who do a lot of important projects all over Ukraine. Today, we will discuss various strategic communications about how participation influences communicating and communication in general. I will tell you a little bit about myself, why I am authorized to tell you about this. I've been working in advertising for 17 years. I also worked in content creation and communications. Half of these years I've been into strategic development. I have worked with Microsoft and with the National Health Service of Ukraine, with design studios and music bands, with festivals, with protest movements, and my range of topics include medical and justice reforms. Within the past 4 years, I have been a co-founder of SUPERWISE, a strategic supervision bureau, and 4 years ago, we have developed a huge strategic communication plan for the organization 100% of life. This project aimed at supporting the medical, the healthcare reform in Ukraine. It is called Your Family Doctor. So today I will tell you more about this as a representative, as a co-founder of this project, which is who is responsible for external communication. So what is Your Family Doctor? This is the name of the project, which is aimed at communicating the reformed primary um, healthcare. So why it happened? Because at the very beginning of this reform, there were a lot of problems. Family doctors had a lot of new challenges and responsibilities. Rules of the game have changed a lot. And of course, everybody was complaining. This reform was very difficult, and that was partly due to the lack of communication, because doctors and healthcare workers were left alone in terms of communication. Because of that, healthcare really suffered, because when we reach out to a doctor, we understand how they mood and state of mind can influence how they help us, and it has direct impact on the healthcare of everyone. That is why 25,000 doctors who were not satisfied, a lot who were left behind without any proper communication, they were at risk. Well, I'm kidding, but in any case, 100% of Life charitable organization reached out to us, and altogether we started thinking about how to tackle this issue. Today we are discussing all this. we're discussing participation. So the project Your Family Doctor is unique because it has been born as a result of participation. We had a strategic session which included the former head of healthcare service, who is now the Minister of Healthcare of Ukraine, Mr. Leshko. There were representatives of CSOs, doctors, healthcare workers, representatives of patient organizations, and we started thinking about how to tackle this issue. So the project came to life. It is called Your Family Doctor. It was born as a result of our joint participation, including all the relevant stakeholders who work in the topic of the primary healthcare line. And they were really interested in making it as good as possible, friendly to people, tolerant, efficient, and effective, because doctors need to keep us healthy. That is why at the basis of this brand is participation. This is an excellent way to create communication strategies that I will tell you about. First, we need to get all the people together, all the stakeholders together, or to talk to each of them individually to understand how your communication program might be important for all of them. Our brand has turned out to be very important for everyone, and now I will tell you why. But first, I would like to tell you more about what is communication and strategy. And what is communication strategy? We need to define the terminology first. Communications, it is very important. It comes from Latin and it means do something jointly, do something together. So communication means to do something together. Communication in the sense that we use it right now, it means that it unites thoughts, ideas, calls to action, some kind of opinions that we all share. Communication strategy, this is the part of the general strategy that uses the key tool of communication. Strategy might be product strategy, a technical strategy, economic strategy, and there are many others. Communication strategy is aimed at communication, which uses communication as a key tool to reach higher goals at the institutional or political level. So what is a strategy? Strategy is also quite simple. Strategy is the way from point A to point B. Point B is the place where we want to be in a short period of time after overcoming a series of challenges. We understand these challenges, we understand these barriers, and we know how to overcome them. I can say barriers, limitations, or resources which are limited. If your resources are not limited, if you have all the money, all the time in the world, all the power in the world, if you have access to all the best experts and skills and knowledges, you don't need a strategy. You can just do what you do, take your time, and be relaxed because time, money, and experts, this is what you have. And sooner or later, you will reach your goal.
24 на добу, 24 години на добу, у нас є обмеження по часу, у нас є проєктні строки, у нас є обмежені доступи до ресурсів, і нам доводиться трошки перестрибувати по камінцях
Have
через
limited access to the resources, limited time. That's why we have to wind about these limitations in order to reach one desired result, the goal, the long-term goal that we have set up for ourselves. And here is why we need a strategy. Strategy is this strategy how to jump between the stones in the river in order not to collapse and not to fall down into the water and reach the opposite bank. Communication strategy in this sense is quite an interesting tool, quite a challenging tool. Well, strategy is something that allows us to overcome barriers and limits. And when we're talking about communication strategy, communication as a process has its own challenges because when we talk about communication, there are always two sides. There is a person who is giving the message and the person who is receiving a message. Each side has its own way how to code the information, how to encrypt and decrypt the information, and the words you're using can be perceived completely differently on the other side, and the format as well. Also, there are some exterior obstacles that influence on your message. For example, in social networks back in 2000s, it was a good tone to wish nice Friday to everyone. And now you cannot actually wish a nice and funny Friday someone after bad news that are coming. So external obstacles, external circumstances, they would influence your message and how it will be perceived. And you have to take it into account when you think about the channels to send your messages. And this makes communication strategies more complicated because everything connected with people communication needs some kind of experience and skill. What is the communication strategy? What are the parts of communication strategies, the points, and the path between them? So, what we're looking at, first of all, we are looking at the tasks of the strategy. What is the goal? What are the barriers we're trying to overcome? What we want to achieve by using the strategy? What is our end goal? Like to change the perception, to bring in some changes to the society, to implement a project, to support a proposition, or something else. It is important to remember that there should be a goal that should be a long-term goal, because if it's for 1 or 2 weeks, it's not a strategy, it's a plan. What is the difference between strategy and a plan? By the scale and by the number of the things that are not known, that are not certain. The more long-term your goal is, the more there will be things that you will not know beforehand. And now we can see very clearly how life influences our strategies and plans. So strategy doesn't say a step-by-step plan, but it sets up the principles, how you would take decisions on the next step each time. So you shouldn't ignore strategy, even in the times of high uncertainties as we have now. The second component of the strategy is the target audience. We have to understand what kind of stakeholders and target audience we have to communicate to achieve our goals. In order to make sure your project is implemented and you are reaching your goal, you're able to reach your goal, you have to influence certain people. What is the difference between the target audience and stakeholders? Those are terminology from a little bit different paradigm, but still stakeholders are everyone who are somehow concerned or touched by what you are doing somehow. So your decisions, your ideas, your projects will influence these people somehow. And you can think about the key stakeholders. I will tell you, I will give you the example of this when I will be telling about your family doctor. And target audience is the broader audience, as a certain group you want to influence, you want to change the opinion, etc. For example, in our project, Your Family Doctor, we decided that we want to change the culture of of the healthcare, of taking care of yourself, of people, of certain categories of people. And you have to understand very well, you have to understand the profile of these people from your target audience group. Who are they? You have to understand who are those people who take important decisions, who are those people who would help you or who would try to interfere with your activity in the authorities, in maybe media, in NGOs, maybe in communities. people who will oppose, you can also break them down into groups and create their profiles. There are some typical representatives in each group, and you can describe them. For example, this group of people is like this person, for example, or you can just make a profile with a general description of this person. What is important while drawing up the profile? The attitude of this person to what you are doing. It is important to understand where these people take information, what they pay attention to. If you work with big businesses, for example, once we were writing the strategy for Microsoft corporate segment, you have to understand what kind of media they read, like what kind of media the top managers of big corporations read, in order to understand how and on which platforms you can communicate with them to influence their decision making. Then you have to understand what is your environment, who else is active in this informational field or environment, which NGOs or institutions is also talking to your target audience about these topics, how they do this, what exactly they communicate. Are they rather on your side, or they're trying to push forward some alternative or opposite idea? Will they help you, or uh, vice versa? Are their communication strategies successful or not, and what we can learn from this? Then you have to, taking into account all this, you have to think what you have to tell each target segment, each target group, what you have to say to each segment of stakeholders, each group of stakeholders, and each group of target audience in order to be able to reach your goal. For example, for your family doctor project, in the very beginning, when we started supporting them within the turbulent moment of medical healthcare reform implementation, we had to show the doctors, you are supported. There is someone who is taking care about your rights, about your time off, about your personal life. There is someone there who will teach you, who will teach the patients how to use the healthcare service. There is someone to tell the patients that this change is not tremendous, everything is fine. You just need to learn this information. You will understand how the system works, and there is nothing horrible happening. Everything is fine. You will manage this. Also, to communicate that doctors now have some new duties, and you can use them as their ambassadors. We could communicate this to the partner organizations, that they could use doctors as their ambassadors. So there were different groups and segments of stakeholders and target audience, and for each of them there was a regional message. Then for each of these audience groups, we have to understand what are the channels and tools of communication. What kind of information is better to be presented in a video or in a newspaper, maybe a leaflet, maybe a Facebook post? What kind of information we need to put up on site, and sometimes maybe for certain information there is no point to use website, and there is no point to spend resources on that. And how do we measure the success? How do we understand that we are on the right track? You have to measure what is different, how your target audience groups are behaving, whether they're thinking differently. What is the behavior change? Those can be both qualitative and quantitative indicators, and qualitative are more difficult to calculate and to evaluate, but they are very important. And for example, quantitative, like how many subscribers you have at your page, for example, and in such a way you can measure how many people were covered with your information, how many people you reached with your information. So how it happens in our project, Your Family Doctor. Our stakeholders are the key groups of patients and patient organizations. We call them professional patients, people who need good health care service by family doctors, people with chronic diseases, people who have AIDS and have to take care about their health and be on to get therapy all life, throughout all the life, people with diabetes, elderly people, young children. So these are people who deal with healthcare system mostly. Then stated institutions, Ministry of Healthcare, National Healthcare Service Center of Public Health are very interested in our activity, and we have a lot of partner projects with them. We make our family doctors as the agents of state information. We make this information available. We rewrite it in a simple language so that people could inform the colleagues and people could inform the community they work with. They can inform their patients. They can raise awareness on how the healthcare system work, etc. NGOs, healthcare NGOs, of course, we cooperate with a lot of professional doctors communities, a lot of NGOs which are also working in healthcare, media. Why media? Because media really like to spread unverified information, and sometimes, very often, they take commands from people who are not professionals in this field at all. So we are working with the media, and we say so. If you want some professional comment about healthcare, please ask family doctors. They are professionals, they experts, they can tell the right thing. This is how we also kind of raise their status in the society, and we increase the trust to them in the society. Also, conferences and universities and other higher educational establishments that prepare doctors, that teach doctors. We want to cooperate with them a lot in order to implement some standards starting from the communication stage. So these are our stakeholders. As to the target audience, we have the broad audience, everyone who needs doctor's advice, healthcare, so doctors, and the heads of healthcare establishments and institutions, hospitals, etc., as they are employers of the doctors, and they're interested in our program and we're interested in them. As to the communication channels, you see we have lots of them: website, different social media, different messengers. YouTube is for our video contact. Also, we cooperate with the TV, commercial, external commercial, and we work with our stakeholders to work with commercial ads. As to the tools, except for the standard media stories like special videos, commercial ads, posters, banners, etc., we also, at a certain moment, we understood that our value can be communicated through the doctors in the best way. That's why we created territorial units in 6 oblasts. These are initiative groups of doctors who wants to learn, who wants to develop, they want to follow the trends. They are activists, and we organize trainings for them. And sometimes they communicate between themselves and they make visits to different hospitals and other health care organizations. We do PR for them in the regional media and those oblasts where we have regional units. So they become the key people in the region. They become ambassadors of our values. They become a support for this profession in the region, so other doctors can come to them for an advice, and the patients also can come to them after reading an article about them. Some practical advice. What actually what we promote and what we have learned in our project, Your Family Doctor. The first mistake, so to say, communicational mistake, is to think that people already know. The biggest communicational risk is not to make a communication when everybody is sure communication has took place, although actually it hasn't. Sometimes you think you explained it once and it's enough, or you mentioned it once and it's clear for everyone. But in most of the cases, it's not like that. Please check, make sure that these things that kind of evident for you are evident for everyone else. In many cases, it's not like that. For example, we were doing our social media for the doctors. We were creating useful content for the doctors, but at the same time, we were giving advices for patients that they could share in their social medias. For example, a post, how to eat in winter, or how to get vaccinated, flu, how to get flu vaccination. And we're not telling this to the doctors. We want doctors to share this information with their patients. And it turned out the doctors do not understand why we are making this post. And doctors were asking us, can we share your posts? They thought that it's kind of our intellectual property and they cannot share this post. And our brand strategy was built on this sharing principle that doctors will be our ambassadors and they will share our contact. But most of the doctors were not even sure if they have right to share the posts. And sometimes it is really important to repeat the things that seem evident to you. Also, everything is a betrayal until something opposite is proven. So if you're talking about some fact, so a decision, certain decision was making, or certain legislation amendment, you have to explain what it means, because sometimes people perceive things in a very unexpected way. You have to explain everything in a very simple language, because otherwise people will interpret it, may interpret it in their own way, and even a very positive decision can be seen as a problem and as something negative. Anastasia, I'm sorry, I have to remind you about the time limit. How much time do I have? Well, there is no time actually left. Okay, 2 more minutes, if I may. Another principle: sell what you do. Do not be afraid of negative information. Don't be afraid to tell people what you are doing, and then do not be afraid of some negative information. And it is good if you can collect all the negative thoughts in one place.
Комунікуйте регулярно, навіть якщо
Communicate regularly. If one decision hasn't been made yet, please don't lose the opportunity to tell about it. Say that it's under, so that there is a process of making this decision. Thank people that have joined us. So thank everyone. Thank for the negative comments. It is necessary to increase the value of communicating with you. Tell what cool people joined you, what important things they have done. Create ambassadors. Ambassadors, these are people in Ukraine. It is a problem with the trust to institution. Find someone who will talk instead of you, just what we did with the doctors. Create coalitions, chats, rule the world, collect all these people in chats. Your ambassadors, these are really cool people and they can help you a lot. If everyone creates Facebook pages or news pages on their websites, it might not be the best way. Maybe you need a newsletter, you need a printed out paper, which is distributed all over the supermarket or in a park. There are different communication channels, and you are the one who knows best your community. People go there where they are respected and given attention to, where their time is valued and respected. And please respect their limited time, their limited resources and everything. And if you struggle to find something, take a look at what other people do. Thank you so much, Cedos. Thank you so much. Let's stay friends. Your family doctor and myself, Anastasia Pustova, say goodbye to you. Thank you so much, Anastasia. You can take a look at Anastasia's contacts if you need help or support. If you have questions to Anastasia, you can write it to them in the chat. Please take it into account that Anastasia will respond to you later. Right now, I would like to use my power as a moderator and ask a short question to you. So after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, what key changes have happened in the area of strategic communications? What challenges you see? Which relevant advice you can give to other people, advice that are related to communication? The first thing that I notice is that people has become more tolerant to communications because everything is done very fast. We are overcoming challenges. So people have become more open to raw new formats of communication. At the same time, they are they really communication to be relevant and valuable. If it's not valuable, if there is no value, then people won't notice it because right now people really value time, money, time, and attention. We only have so much attention span. That is why respect and attention, this is what I must highlight. Maybe the communication, maybe the design is not perfect, but it must save people's time. It must be valuable. It must have value, maybe emotional value. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we started creating online meetings of doctors so they can get together and discuss how their work has changed in different oblasts of Ukraine. It was a great professional support to them, emotional support. They understand that there are other people in the same context with them, that they can reach out to their colleagues from other parts of Ukraine, and it was of great value. Thank you so much, Anastasia. Of course, support is very important. Creating such platforms for support is of utmost importance. It seems to me that it is very relevant to give this piece of advice so that you shall not create a vacuum. You shall communicate even if the design is not ideal, but you still need to communicate. So there are no rumors, because sometimes I think that the level of criticism to information has been lowered. There is a lot of communication, a lot of very important communication. That is why critical thinking suffers sometimes. And it is very important to make sure that you do not distribute non-verified information. It is very relevant now. Thank you so much, Anastasia. Please ask questions to Anastasia in the chat, or probably you will reach out to her later. We will have some time for a Q&A session. Now I would like to give it over to Yana Tchaikovska. It will be some kind of a continuation of this communication line. Yana is coordinator of the project of Small Rivers of Vinnytsia region, representative of the urban development movement of the city. I follow this project a lot. I follow its development, and it seems to me that from the point of view of different formats of formal and non-formal communication might be a source of inspiration for everyone. How to implement a project and continue communicating it, cooperating with local residents and many other actors at the national level and the local level, even during the war, when it seems that it's not relevant, it's not the right time to do that, but we need to continue doing that. I would also like to say that I call on you to watch our webinar, which we had in December. It was our first webinar within the series of webinars where we cooperated with the representatives of Vinnytsia. We discussed how engagement happens right now, engagement to creating memory projects, commemorating projects. For example, the Перемоги Victory Square in Vinnytsia. We also discussed it with representatives of Mykolaiv, discussing the same topics using urban development. So, Yana, over to you. Thank you so much, Maria. Welcome, everyone. I am happy to see all of you. Small Rivers of Vinnytsia. Just a second. Can you please turn the page? Thank you. Vinnytsia and small rivers. Let me tell you a little bit about the project before proceeding to communication. So Vinnytsia, which has existed for many years, and suddenly people understood that there are not only rivers, but there are also a lot of small rivers, small sources of water, and these small rivers, there are 37 of them. The city is not big. However, in addition to Veliki Bugh River, there are a series of smaller rivers. There is this blue network of body of waters that you can see on this map. There are such small rivers all over the city in small districts, and nobody knows about that. That is why the communication behind this was to make sure people know about these rivers, because before this project, local residents and representatives of the local government didn't know that Vinnytsia has such a huge water potential. One of the first messages of our communication was to tell everyone that Vinnytsia has a lot of rivers. As for the project, we studied it in a comprehensive way. We had studied a lot about these rivers, about what we want to do with them, what kind of potential they have, what kind of opportunities we have, and capacities our rivers have. Based on this, we have created 4 approaches, 4 aspects that you can see on this map. No matter what we do, no matter what we communicate, we are based on these 4 factors. The first one is ecological approach, ecological factor, because it is the most important. It is about the nature, about flora, fauna, and this is the ecological dimension, ecological value, environmental value of these rivers. Second, this is about space, about mobility, accessibility, about territory in itself. This third aspect is mental. This mental dimension contains these communication, contact, interaction, and participation, which is very important. It is very important for people to understand what these rivers are, that there are a lot of rivers in Vinnytsia, and second, what kind of, it is important to understand what kind of values these rivers have. And the fourth dimension is algorithm of development of the network. We need to do this replication, use this replication, so these approaches can be used as a system. What about our vision and the topic and the subject behind our project? So we see that there are a lot of corridors. These rivers can be used as corridors for the local residents. Here on this map, you can see that there are a lot of conflicts there is one river, and very often many rivers are underground. There are a lot of pollution. There is a lot of pollution and some kind of buildings located nearby. Our goal was to create this network of rivers, to create a lot of natural corridors. This is what we want to communicate to our local residents. Within the start of the project, we have developed several groups of target audience that we cooperate and interact with. So here you can see that there are a lot of active residents. After the start of the project, they have started working with us. Now there are also representatives of the local government. We also have experts. Those experts help us with the research. They understand the topic of our work. They understand what to do with all these. They are really interested. These stakeholders, so they might be business owners, owners of apartment buildings or garages that are located here. So there are really a lot of stakeholders. These are local residents who live in Vinnytsia. And now I'll tell you more about the sequence of our contacts, of establishing contacts with all representatives of this community. We have started with and creating a narrow circle of experts because we wanted to discover this topic as an organization. And then later, we have reached out the expert community. We had several consultations with international and local experts. We have started engaging representatives of different departments of the city council and to create this network of cooperation with experts in order to create a joint vision. Then later, we have created a broader circle with the community, with the general public. The first people that we reached out to, these were people that knew something about that, urban activists, ecologists, and other people who knew something about rivers and the nature. So those were the people that valued what we do. And then only later we started communicating about our project for the general public, for all the inhabitants of Vinnytsia. Of course, after these 3 stages, we had quite a hot period when communication was limited to accepting everyone. This project has become very popular right away, and we had to have a lot of communication. It wasn't systematized, but after this wave of communication, we have finally started the project of systematization of this communication. Right now, I will tell you more about each of these stages. As I have explained you, we used a lot of internal network development. The project has started with a group of people. This topic was at 3 departments of the city council. We have started getting all of them together. We have started understanding what kind of competencies that they had and what they needed. This was an internal networking. It was very interesting to see that we reached out different levels of the city council. We communicated with many people from the city council. One time we have used format coffee with the deputy mayors. Each time we added to the agenda of a project about the rivers. So this topic was spread all over the departments, all over this building. Our values, our approaches to the project were taken into account. We explained how we see the development of the river network, and everyone in the city administration very soon knew about it. Later, when we visited the city council later, everyone understood who is responsible for this project and how it has to be done.
Наступний ось цей ширший проект ми назвали його експедиціями, тобто вихід людей в простір,
So
пішок в люди.
the next
Тільки після
stage we
цього
called
експертної комунікації у нас сформувалася
expedition, and it was a guided tour. We invited people to explore the territory. Those were people who partly or fully understood this topic. These were environmentalists, and we started calling them fans of small rivers of Vinica because they attended almost every event. And this was a community in itself of people who cared about the project. The idea was to bring someone there because there are a lot of locations that were located in the city, but nobody knew about it. It was important for us to get people there, and then later people would be able to communicate with what they see, to communicate with the nature. It worked really well, and it was very popular all over the city.
Тут ми пройдемось достатньо швидко, тобто це приклад тої інформації,
This is a project of information that we collected after conducting these events, visiting the cities. Based on all these requests, based on all this feedback, we made the decision on about what people liked, what they disliked.
І ось як для прикладу,
As an example, when people
могли відмітити
saw the river banks, they could mention what places that they liked best. And based on this feedback, we have made the decision on creating pilot space. So this is the place where we would develop something and people can visit. This was an example of two-way communication because not only we told those people about our project, but they provided us with their feedback so we can improve. After creating of this circle of activists, fans of small rivers, who thought that this topic was very important, we had to create a wider range of community, those people who are not really interested in this topic, but who still live in the city. That is why we have started adding topics to our events. We have invited local residents, those people who live nearby, and we distributed invitations. We have used TV in order to tell more about our project. And we started discussing interesting topics when seeing all these people. People really liked this collective work. They really liked getting together this spring after the start of the full-scale invasion. We really doubted whether to invite people or not, but it turned out that people really need that because they needed to be in the nature, to do something physical, to do something positive. It was really important. That is why even this year we managed to create a series of events that where we invited a
але все ж сусіднє біорізноманіттями боролися з борчівником.
And it was very popular. We were also doing a lot of important activities within trying to tackle the invasive implantation in the riverbanks. Also, we were talking about the history. We were talking about this history of the city, about the heritage. We started to do this, this kind of tours dedicated not only to the river, but to the broader context. Also, we covered quite a lot of people, just communicating with the people who live nearby in order to ask them what they think it was important, why the people understand that they live next to the river, what this river means to them, how do they see the future of this river, whether they understand the potential of this river for the city, etc. So it was kind of broader communication with different stakeholders. Also, we use the public opinion polls and questionnaires. So this is our Facebook page. On our Facebook page, we report on the project. We tell what is being done. We share some successful practices and the results of the researches that we do. We had climatical researches, hydrological researches, etc. Also, we invite people we ask them questions. We will make kind of games, quiz games. So we ask people questions and we give them prizes like caps, t-shirts, etc. And this is the project of the pilot space at the river bank. We want our project to have some physical implementation, not only some informational part. And there is a plan to build something there, but from the point of view of communication, it is a very interesting mechanism. There are several high-rise buildings, blocks of flats near this river, and the residents of those buildings are very interested to have space there. However, there are some private houses close to the river, and those people, they radically oppose creating some public space there because they're afraid that some alcohol and drug addicts will come there. They will be drinking and making noise there. So there are two types of residents there, but they have completely opposite opinions. And we understood that people who live in the blocks of flats, they follow and they will come to our event and they understand what happens. But people who live in the private houses, they are older, and it was quite difficult to reach out to them and to make them come to our event. And we understood that if only the residents of the blocks of flats will come, it will be a very successful event because they all support our project. But it is a value of it's one of the values of our project to cover everyone. And so we use different communication channels to attract other people. We made some leaflets. We were putting them in the mailboxes. It was a more difficult way, but we really want these people also to be engaged, and we want them to tell us what are their concerns. It was a very intensive event. As I said, those people were quite radically against, but there was a participation magic and there was a communication. Those people from the blocks of flats and private houses started talking to each other. The people who were supporting this public space, they started explaining why it is important to them. Other people also were explaining why they don't want this public space. And in the end, everyone was happy, and we understood that there will be a public space there. And we said that we will take into account all the opinions, and we will make sure that all the conflicts are addressed and all of their concerns are addressed and mitigated. So it was we consciously started this event understanding there will be a conflict and we could avoid a conflict, but it was important for us to invite everyone and to make this conflict happen and to make the resolution of this conflict happen as well. Speaking of the further events, the project of the space finished this year. So now there is a second stage to communicate the final project. So we communicated the idea and now we have to communicate the results. Thank you very much, Yana. Your time is up. Yeah, thank you. I'm about to finish. This year, we have new communication approach. We say communication navigation, as we call it. We want to invite people to walk with us in the small rivers, but we also want to develop mechanisms to make it possible for people to walk there alone, because there are some concerns like safety, like dirty paths, etc. But we understand that people have to be free to come there. So our communication campaign is now aimed to reach these people and to tell them that you can come to the river and here's what you can do that. And we offer them some options of activities they can do near the river bank. It is great when there is someone who is supporting projects, but at certain point, this person can be a little bit overloaded because this person receives a lot of information, including the information about all the small rivers in all over the world. And it's great because this popular becomes important, but we need to make a system of this information in order not to be overloaded and drowned by the ideas and informational processes. And now we are writing the concept of development of small rivers of Vinica, and this project will also use all of these communication mechanisms, and we want to make sure that there are more people in Vinica Oblast who knows how to work with small rivers to create some kind of guidelines and rules, etc. And we were talking about it a little bit after the previous presentation. We have our format of Facebook page. We speak about something nice, nature, development, etc. And last Saturday, you know what happened? I was writing this post about the practices in Swiss. I was writing this post half of the day. I posted this, and then I see the news and I understand what happens in Dnipro. And like I just wrote this nice post about public space in Switzerland, and you always think like whether those posts about development, about relaxation, about something nice, whether they are relevant and how they can exist in the same informational fields together with the news about the shelling in Dnipro. And it's kind of a question without an answer. However, we are still trying to focus on the sustainability despite everything. Our team is also engaged in some humanitarian work in help with ADPs, but we understand that we do need also focus on development and sustainability because we just want to be ready to act when there is a good time to end. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jana, for sharing your experience, for sharing your ideas on communication about ecological projects, urban projects. Today, when we have war in our country, are there any questions to Jana? Alana, if there is any hands raised, please let me know. No hands raised. But if you want to ask a question, I remind you that you can write it in the chat and Jana will reply to you in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask your question right now. I have a question to you, Jana. I know that Vinica today, that you have a lot of IDPs in Vinica today, and you have different projects connected with the engagement of people, but within the projects like this, for example, like Small Rivers project, do you engage IDPs? Do you communicate to IDPs about them? Do you include them to your target audience? If yes, please tell us how. If not, please tell us why and what are your plans? Yes, thank you. We were discussing this in the previous season of our small tours, and there were a lot of city tours organized for IDPs in Vinica, and we were thinking whether small rivers could be one of the components of these tours. because of course it's important for people who come to stay in the city to know about the city. And we thought that small rivers, maybe it's a little bit too early for newcomers, because it's rather information for the people who live in the city for a long time and they know all its beautiful places and they're ready to see something alternative. But for the next year, we plan to engage newcomers to our city, and we will be communicating not only about the small rivers, because it's quite a difficult subject to engage people, but some common walks in the nature that will include small river places which are more accessible, and we will promote it as a healthy lifestyle, etc. Both for, and everyone will be included, both IDPs and the citizens of Vinnytsia. Thank you very much. During the previous meeting, we were also discussing the engagement of IDPs, and I think that your project could be a good basis for social cohesion, for social integration, because you have a lot of meetings connected with some action like research or community or common work, and it can have some even therapeutical effect, because action can be the first step to take responsibility for your life to come back to normal, etc. And I think it can be a very good success story for the future, and you can easily engage new or temporary citizens of your community. Thank you very much. I remind you, if you will have any questions to Yana, you can write them in the chat and we will ask Yana to reply. And then I would like to invite Rudolf to talk about the urban project, city development documentation, integrated development of the cities, and how it is possible to build the communication about the projects and decisions made around them based on your experience. And also during our next meeting, we are going to talk in details about those city planning, city development documents that you will need in order for your rebuilding projects, renovation projects. Today, we would like to analyze the experience we already have and practices that have been already implemented in order to be guided by the processes that we already know. So I give the floor to Rudolf Gref. Please tell us about the importance of communication on the city development projects, and what are the key components, what are the main values, what are the communication approaches, especially when you speak about some difficult decisions for many stakeholders and actors. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. And thank you also to the four speakers for the very interesting presentations they delivered. I will speak from the perspective a bit of somebody who's doing urban planning as a professional, but worked a lot for, with, and inside public administrations in the last years. And I suppose that we have here in our audience a lot of people who have done the same thing, or at least to some extent have done the same thing. And regarding the question why communication is important, I would just ask our audience how often or did you ever hear in a town hall meeting or in a public presentation, did you ever hear the sentence, well, it's just paper, it's just plans. Come on, let's not talk so much. Let's do something. We talk for such a long time. Let's do something. Like, let's make something. Doesn't matter what. Or you just promise us things and nothing happens out of this. We've seen so much paper in the last years. We don't want to see it again. And I suppose that many of you have heard this before. It's always surprisingly unpleasant, even if it's not the first time. And it's exactly the reason why communication is important, to be able to answer these types of concern and to prevent them, because they're, in the end, they're very legitimate observations. Some people who attend meetings organized by us, either organized by professionals or by city halls, are raising. And at the core of these concerns is basically really the fear, let's say, or the misunderstanding. Is this process, is this urban planning, is this what we do here, is it real at all? Does this have to do with reality? Does it change reality? Will it have any impact at all? Or we're just doing it for the sake of doing it? And I think communication is relevant to convince the people about the impact of urban planning and about the relevance of participating in this decision-making processes regarding spatial planning and dimension. Now, the peculiar thing about this is, of course, that the people who do urban planning and learn to do urban planning, let's say in a classical way, at least as I have seen it in Romania or in Eastern Europe in general, but not only, are used to do this in a, let's say, a very top-down manner. You know, they say what has to be done and it's the best option and this has to be done. And then as professionals, we are very frustrated if it's not happening or if it's not accepted or if, you know, the community wants something else or certain individuals want something else. And it's definitely so that I think during our education time as urban planners or architects, we, in the past at least, we lacked this teaching about communication, about empathy, I think very important, about listening, yeah, and about being able to deal with conflicts during a communication. But, and I speak now very much about this very direct interpersonal communication, as you might have concluded, yeah. I mean, what really happens when you meet with people in a room. In the meantime, after Corona, we have a lot of, and also with a crisis in Ukraine, we have a lot of online communication, which is again, requires different skills and tools. So urban planning is indeed a very abstract thing for most people, and convincing them it's real and it has an impact is for me one of the main things to do inside such a project. And in the meantime, there are a lot of guidelines how to do it. I mean, there are a lot of tools. We will look at some of them I know or have used during the last years. Definitely, I have to say the core of urban planning is communication and not planning in the end, yeah, if I would summarize it. So it's important to have a short takeaway. Yeah, it's important to communicate these decisions and during the process of urban development in order to ensure transparency, accountability in the public sphere. Yeah, this builds trust, it's important to do it in order to engage your stakeholders. And I have to say here, something you very often do very automatically, the stakeholder matrix is really a very useful tool to be revisited and used, because it fuels this process and it helps you a lot to readjust certain formats, to re-engage the people you work with. It addresses legitimate concerns of the community, because we always have to keep in mind when we enter a meeting or such a process, we don't start from zero. I mean, we might start from zero for ourselves because it's the first time we are in that city, maybe as professionals, yeah, or it's the first time we do such kind of a process as a public administration. But life doesn't stop and start with integrated urban planning. Is it okay for the translation, or I'm speaking too fast? Okay, I guess it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. It helps avoiding conflicts in the future and discuss them now. And in the end, you attain a lot of support for what you want to do in the future by really engaging into an extensive communication and interaction and participatory approach when you do urban planning for a city, integrated urban planning. Also, I would like to show you some examples of some instruments that are that we can use. As a general rule, I think it's very important to have a clear and simple language, not to overwhelm people with some professional terminology. It's super efficient to use visuals, yeah, to visualize in drawings and even more simple plans. What are your goals? What do you propose? And also to receive input in this type of format, yeah, in a spatial way already. You can always use storytelling to exemplify things and to engage more responses, because it's something people are used to deal with. It depends, of course, from situation to situation, but it can be used for very particular things and to great effect. A general rule is, of course, and it was said before much better than I can say it now, really to have a communication plan, to know whom you are addressing, to know whom you're addressing with what tools and instruments, on what channels. It can't be stressed enough what you do online, what you do in classic media, what you do with different type of events. And then really give the space for feedback. Yeah, it's something very often participatory processes are structured as an information process or information campaign, but they don't give the room for feedback. And what we want to achieve actually is a co-creation process. Yeah, we want to achieve results together with the public and with our stakeholders and with our target groups. Yeah, and I mix them together now, but during such a long process like urban planning, which can go from 1 to 2 to 3 years maybe, these roles also shift depending on the specific phase of the project. I would share with you some instruments we used in Chernivtsi and in Timișoara mostly. Just 1 second. So I need to. To make a full screen, sorry. Yeah. You see the presentation, or you see my presenting screen?
Yeah, everything okay.
It's okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. So just as a placative image, you know, communication is a two-way highway, and a lot of accidents happen on it. So in general, I think it's very important to never to enter any stage of a communication process. In this case, for example, the images from a workshop, thinking that what you wish to achieve is well understood by everybody from the beginning. So having a clear statement, having clear information is super important. Also having clear working methodology and knowing where you want to, or what you want to achieve, what the results should be, not in terms of content, but what you want to gain and to achieve from the people you work with. This is unfortunately just Romanian now, but at some point I did it for me in a very simple way. You know, when you engage in urban development and when you engage in communicating the process and trying to get feedback, first step is really to observe what's around you, meaning to have a stakeholder matrix, to know who are the people you work with, you want to work with, to know who are the people you want to engage, to be open for surprises and for new people, of course, to communicate what you're about to do on all channels possible. Again, of course, respecting or trying to identify whom you reach best and how. Invite people to as many open formats as possible. Give them the space to answer and to give feedback. As crazy as it sometimes seems, because people with no formal training in urban development or in urban planning will have something to say, because in the end it's the city they live in. And then of course always communicate the result of your meetings and of what you're doing together, and retake this loop as many times as necessary. Yeah, so you don't do this just one time, you probably will need to do it again and again and again. A tool we used, for example, in Czernivtsi during Czernivtsi Integrated Urban Development Plan was urban planning newspaper, we called it. We used this format because we said newspaper is something everybody knows. Very few people can work with a big A0 plan or A1 plan. They're not used to it. They don't know how to fold it. It's complicated. So we put basically the information of our integrated urban development concept in a format that is accessible to people, in a more easy way. And we printed several, I think maybe 2,000 even pieces and distributed it widely in the city. Something also that works quite well, depending on some circumstances, is a public exhibition with in different stages. It doesn't have to be only one. Yes, so I mean, when you make your participatory concept, you need to make sure that, like I said, people can give feedback, that you can come back on your work, present it again. So in this case, this was our final exhibition, but yeah, you can do this as many times as necessary, and even integrate in these exhibitions an opportunity for feedback. But also, not to forget, include something like mentoring for the exhibition, let's say, because a lot of the people who will see the exhibition, if it's in a public square, for example, they will look at the plans, if you have plans, and they will be it will be very hard for them to follow up through the information inside there, to make a synthesis of all the pieces that are in the exhibition and have a conclusion about it. So these are things that are difficult to do if you don't have a training in this area, to understand the information, to analyze it, to compile it, and to understand what it means for you somewhere in your neighborhood, who knows who in the city, when you never was interested in such things. And one very good tool is to have people during the exhibition there who can explain the content and who can give an explanation to people from the general public. Localizing your urban development concept is something very useful too. I mean, most of our big overarching plans that we do, let's say we have a spatial vision, like in this case, we had a spatial vision for Czernivtsi, and it said, for example, one of our principles is neighborhood-oriented action, and polycentric city, and the city of short walking distances where pedestrians are favorized and you have a good quality of public space that gives easy access to public space, not only if you have a car, but also if you are by foot or if you're a child, it gives you the necessary safety. And so these are very broad, very general terms. They are used all over the European professional discourse and political discourse in the meantime. They are in the Leipzig Charta and Agenda 2030, but still you cannot expect the average citizen to be familiar with them and to really be sure what they mean. And truth speaking, it's not even really necessary, because in the end, you will need to produce this change on the ground in the city, somewhere in the city. And suddenly your very broad principle can find a space and a place to show itself. And if you manage to have small pilot projects that illustrate your overarching principles and objectives and vision, and make it tangent, yeah, so that people say, okay, that's what you mean by it, and that's what we will see in the rest of the city too in the coming years. It has multiple advantages. First of all, and I'm coming back to what I said in the beginning, it makes your urban planning something very real, something that produces an impact that you can feel right in your neighborhood maybe, or if you're not from that neighborhood, you know at least it's something real happened in terms of material change, something that can be touched. Yeah, it's always good if it's something that can be touched, but pilot projects can also have different be in different domains. But now we choose here in that case a public space in a segregated neighborhood, for example, in Černivci, to make a pilot project that illustrated some components and objectives of our integrated urban planning. So making this link from strategy down to the reality is a very good thing to communicate your intentions, and more important, to communicate the results of your common work with the public. Yeah, because in the end, this should be something you did together with the community. Yeah, like in this case, we did a public space where we really, if I remember correctly, we had 40,000 euro, so really not a lot of money in 2018 to reshape this public space. And I think I didn't even put a picture here how it looked in the end, sorry. But we did it, it's done. If you go to Černivci, Kaličanka neighborhood, you will see it. But in order to do this, we did a lot of other events there for people to get an awareness for the space. So we didn't just say, okay, we have this money, let's make a nice square here. We first of all looked in the neighborhood who might be the main stakeholders for us to work with, yeah, that can bring our message out, that have a good connection to the community. We had several smaller events like a neighborhood excursion. We had a neighborhood festival, yeah, with a breakdance session, with a literature session near the library where we had a reading outside. So we did 2 or 3 events just in order to activate the space, to activate the community, and to really build up also community expectation and ambition towards that space. Yeah. And by doing so, when we did the project, we had very low resistance to it, yeah, because usually if you start just right away building, you will get some resistance always. It doesn't matter how good it is, what you want to do. But like this, we had a lot of people on board already who knew something will happen and who knew the intention behind is a good one, and who knew that they were consulted about it. They could say their opinion about it. So this localization of objectives that are part of integrated urban development plan is very, very good. Yeah, it's very, very useful. Also, an important step for us here was to document it and to learn from it. So we will use it in future projects. Yeah, so we made a guideline for participatory urban design that the city uses in the future when doing similar projects. Yeah. the last 2 years, I worked in Timișoara City Hall for the mayor as an advisor, and we embarked in the process of reforming the administration. One of the tools we introduced, besides, and that's actually a very important thing, even if it sounds super trivial, and it's something one would say you don't have to speak about, but very important is to have one or more spaces for public debate and town hall meeting formats. Doesn't matter how much you do around it, and you have to do a lot around a physical meeting, before of it, after it, preparing it, communicating it, informing the people, inviting the people. Yeah, it's a lot of work around it. But the value of a meeting itself, when, for example, if we speak from perspective of public administration, a mayor meets with the people in the neighborhood, for example. In this case, I don't speak about the integrated urban development concept, but in this case, we made a new concept for reshaping the public space in a historic neighborhood, but in the entire neighborhood, based on an older concept that was elaborated. And we had here the first meeting, for example, with the people in this neighborhood. In the last 30 years, nobody from the city hall ever went into this neighborhood and had a meeting for several hours with citizens there, asking their opinion about anything. So we identified this space there. We opened this space as a space for community and for public debate. Yeah, it's a multifunctional space. And this was our first meeting there. It was very conflictual, we had bad moderation. We did a lot of things bad that I can say. But nonetheless, it was online, it was live transmission, it was accompanied by exhibition with a project in the public square in front of it. Yeah, like I said, exhibitions are always a very good thing. We had leaflets in a small format for everybody to look on it. Political responsibility was taken for the project, and although it was a very difficult meeting, it was a start for conversation that should go over the years now. Yeah, because something we often also as professionals forget when we do urban planning in general, project design, integrated urban planning, is that this process doesn't start with us and it doesn't finish with us. Yeah, this communication with the general public has to be continuous, and that's why it's very helpful to have some spaces that can give it a bit of stability, to be able to have the spaces near the community, not always in the city hall. Yeah, not always having people come to you, but you being able to go to people, still in a somewhat controlled, let's say, space. And yeah, so it's not to be underestimated, the relevance of let's say spatial infrastructure for having a long-term good communication with citizens and with neighborhoods or target groups.
Rudolf, I'm so sorry. I also need to tell you about the timing.
Yeah, I'm finished immediately. A second tool that we, one tool that we deployed that was a great success now was a digital platform. We introduced it to 1.5 years ago, I think. It's structured after the city of Barcelona has the same one. It's called Decidem, we decide, in our case. And it's a pretty interesting tool because it allows really a lot of engagement, 24/7, so you're not dependent on a very short time frame where you have to do it, and it gives also transparency over the process. Yes, so on the right side you see, for example, the stages of the process. Everybody knows in which stage, what we do, what results we expect, and till when it goes. Yeah, and you have, of course, the possibility to have an overview over the entirety of the City Hall's projects, and especially when you integrate the urban planning, when you have a lot of sectoral topics involved in the process. It's very helpful to be able to have a broad view over them, not only in the office of the city or in an exhibition, but also at hand, at home, at your phone, or at your computer. Okay, so yeah, just 5 points. Why communication is an essential part of urban planning, and why it's important to communicate decision and processes. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Дякую, Рудольф. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and sharing your experience. Чи є у вас запитання?
Dear audience, dear participants, do you have any questions to Rudolf, for some comments, suggestions, whatever? I would like to ask Rudolf, maybe you could share a link to the guidelines you mentioned earlier, the guidelines that were developed. Here in chat, you can send us the link, and also the link to that resource that we created for Timisoara, that interactive resource, so we could check it as an example for inspiration. Also, in the chat, I shared the link to Chromatic Connections website many years ago, in 2019, namely. We worked together with Rudolf on the development of integrated development concepts, and we created some training resource in order on how to develop the concepts. And there are a lot of examples how to communicate, how to raise awareness. And there are a lot of examples about Chernivtsi, Timisoara, etc. And you can take it as an example that can be implemented in other communities. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Katerina Tsibenko. And maybe you will have any questions after our last speaker, and we will have a small Q&A session. Katerina Tsibenko, our invited expert, we will talk about open data, about the access to the information. She will tell about her experience of communication with the institutions in Great Britain, and also it can be relevant to the situation in Ukraine. Of course, in Ukraine now, the access to the data is restricted, and in most of the cases, it is connected with the amendments to the legislations due to the war threat and the actual situations. Some data are closed now, although they should have been open. However, it is important today to talk about the access to information, access to the data, because data is a source to consider and implement the future projects. On the other hand, it's an element of raising awareness, communication, and transparency for our communities. Katerina, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will turn off the video in order to have better connection. I will tell about the experience of Great Britain of dealing with open data in the state sector, public sector. Wait a second. I worked in Open Data Institute organization. I will tell a little bit about myself. From 2015, I work in the public sector in Ukraine in anti-corruption, with such subjects as anti-corruption, democracy, and now I work with the subject of Digital security, I studied in Great Britain University College London, and I got my master's in public administration. Also, I worked in the Open Data Institute, and it was very interesting to compare the practices and experiences and to compare how the NGOs in Great Britain work and how they help both to the public organs, public authorities and business. And it was very interesting to see the levels of engagement of the public to the processes and the level on which Great Britain operates the open data. Of course, it's a very high level, much higher than in Ukraine. That's why in my presentation, I will tell a little bit about Open Data Institute, about ethics, about sharing data, and I will tell about several projects that will work based on the open data. Those are the projects that can be interesting for the audience of this meeting. So let me tell about Open Data Institute. This institute cooperates with the structures of the national level, like police, different ministries, and also with the city councils or something similar to our district council. And their mission to create the world where data works for everyone. What is the difference between our organizations that are working with open data and Great Britain? Is that they work at a very practical level. You will see it in the examples in a very applied level. They are more advanced in using open data sources. And for them, this project is not something very innovative. This is something very applied, very important and useful for people. For example, there was a project, open data project, who helps people to overcome drug addiction. And even for a project like this, you can use open data. Or, for example, they didn't have information about this project on their website, but there was another project and there was a state enterprise engaged, and they were explaining how to improve the environmental situation with the help of the open data. So, and you can follow their website and you can check what projects they have. It's really very interesting. So, as I said, they work with different organizations, businesses, city councils, and they have quite a big research component. They do the researches on the innovative data usage methods. For example, when I was working there at that moment, they had a very interesting project about healthcare data, how they can be used in order to prevent some diseases. For us, it's something rather complicated, I would say, at this stage, but it's interesting to follow how they work with this. So in the Open Data Institute, they use such a scheme of using the data. There are different ways how to use the data. On the right, we see data hoarding. This is when the access to the data is limited to certain organizations. So when some organizations have some kind of monopoly of this type of the data, and only those limited users can benefit from the data. On the left, data fearing is when people are afraid to use the data due to the ethical reasons or because they're afraid of disclosure. For example, when I was working in Transparency International, which were working on the transparency rating. And when we were talking to the city councils, very often there were questions like, why should we make it public? It can be dangerous for people, it can be dangerous for us, people will be against publishing, for example, publishing information about people receiving social aid, whether it is ethical or not. And in order to have some positive influence from the data, you have to stay in the middle of these two poles, so to say. And it's very important to remember about the ethics of data usage. In the Open Data Institute, they have data ethics canvas. It's a tool for those who are collecting and sharing the data, and this tool helps to reveal some ethical problem when handling the data. It is important to minimize negative influence, any adverse influence that this data may have over people in society. You can open this tool by clicking on the second link. I will now also share it in the chat. I will now share it on my screen. So this is the data ethics canvas, and you can see here when the data are being collected, you have to ask yourself a certain number of questions before collecting or sharing the data. And you see that there are quite a lot of questions. For example, the reason why you're using the data. Is it actually really useful? What could be potential negative effect? You see 12 categories of how you can verify whether your activity with the data is ethical. And it's very important to know that the data are inclusive and not exclusive, to prevent creation of some false piece of information. For example, when you don't have the full representatives of all the groups, you may create a false impression about certain category. So this tool also helps to prevent this. So this tool really helps you to assess your activity with data. So this organization proposed the trainings for data ethics canvas tool on the regular basis. And the last link is the announcement of their nearest training. It's a very interesting training. People from all over the world and different organizations are participating. And it's very important not only to listen to the information, but to communicate with the people who work in the same sphere. So it's extremely useful for networking. It's an online event that is being held on a regular basis. Also, I would like to tell you about sharing data. You can achieve positive effect from using the data if the organizations are going to be sharing the data between themselves. And the data is a resource that can be used multiple times. There is no competitorship between the data. They can be used and reused. And very often, some sets of data could be of additional value when combined with another data. And I will be giving you the example of the projects based on open data, and it will be more clear. Those projects were implemented in Great Britain with the support of Open Data Institute, and any of them wouldn't be implemented if the sharing data principle wouldn't have been applied. So it's very important. And generally, Open Data Institute says that data can be closed, data can be shared, and it can be an open source. So the
не обов'язково всі, наприклад, абсолютно дані можуть бути там open, тому що є
So part of the data may be open, but part of the data may be not, and you can still use it
ідентифіковані, вони не можуть бути, наприклад, повністю відкриті.
because some of the data cannot be open completely, but
можуть бути або відкриті, або тільки закриті. Тобто є
organization, so it should be something in the middle. So they can be open for certain people, and then these people can share the data if it is relevant. There are some sensitive types of data, and then you have to be careful about it. So the examples of the project in this public sector, I have three interesting examples, but there are many of them, and there is a link, and you can see more projects if you follow this link. And for example, there is an example of this application for overcoming the addiction, and I think it's a very good example of data that can be used by a certain category of people, and it ruins the stereotype that open data is something uninterested, yet something very complicated, like, for example, a number of beds in the hospital. Who needs that? No, this is something really applied. This is something really useful. A person can use an application which will help. There is also a combination of different data helping people to choose the best way to get their education, university or courses or anything. And also, there is a project that was developed in order to decrease the number of inquiries to the organization, because people, and to guide people to take the information from the open sources. So about going back to this application, helping the people with addictions. In Scotland, according to the statistics in 2017, the number of deaths connected with drug abuse was highest in Europe. That's why they decided to use different data about the people with addictions to the substances, and they combined different data in order to create this application. And they were raising awareness, they were advertising this application, and person can have a lot of information by downloading this application to find help, to collect the data, for example, to keep track of the days when person is not being using. So they use this data to measure the effectiveness of their service. They also made a great communication campaign in order to create the trust of the target audience, and the number of users increases all the time. This application is open at GitHub, so anyone can use it. And on the previous slide, there was a link. And if you are interested in this project, you can follow this link and read in more details about the implementation of the project and challenges the developers faced. ODI supported this project. Also, there were some public funding to support the project. So this is another example, the application, which helps to find an institution or courses or something to find a relevant training you're interested in.
Треба там, щоб не заходити кудись десь там на сайти, чи на форуми, чи в групи, щоб вибрати достовірну, щоб дізнатись достовірну інформацію.
So you can find all the information there.
Вони зібрали досить багато.
They have collected a lot of information. They have combined it. They have combined different open data from different departments.
Так само. І от вони зібрали такий сервіс, теж на основі відкритих даних, які користуються люди.
They have created this service based on data. There is no sensitive data in contrast to the previous service.
Цей такий досить, можна сказати, простіший додаток, але теж ефективний і теж
This is also an effective approach. It shows how using open data can be efficient on a level close to people. And this is what everyone needs, because only in this case you can use the benefits of open data. Another important case about how to use this request to information, this council of this area, they have received a lot of requests about how much taxes are paid for non-residential buildings, because people are interested in who pays these taxes. This information hasn't been published before because it was very difficult to remove personal data, sensitive data. They have decided to use this sharing data system using different companies, state sector from the state office or the state sector. Because it needs to be ethical to publish this open data. So they have created a data set published on the website, which is accompanied by a communication program, a communication campaign. They have managed to decrease the number of requests about access to information, because as it is written in the case, they have spent a lot of information to process all these requests. And with this service, it has become much more easy. There are many other cases which can be used, which can be read. For example, the first one, all of them are interested in order to automatically use data from the families, low-income families, and automatically provide payments to them, or probably to use the automatic results of assurance in order to understand whether it was good or not. I would also like to say about the opportunities that Open Data Institute has. There was training for representatives of the community for local government. I know some people from Ukraine who have visited this. However, there is this training for researchers in case you want to do that. So this is what I wanted to tell you. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. Thank you so much, Katerina, for your presentation. It seems to me that I've heard a lot. So there is a lot of information for inspiration about how we can improve our system and how in the future we can create a more accessible and transparent system of interaction with the citizens as well as with civil society activists. If you have any questions to Katerina, please do ask. Okay, I see that there are no questions. So I think that it will be very important if we share those links that you had in the presentation with our audience, if you don't mind, so they have the opportunity to take a look, at least to those who have got registered for our event, so they have the opportunity to use these tools. Don't you mind? Yes, of course, absolutely. You can use it.
Дуже дякую за можливість.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to take part in this event.
Дякую, Катерино. Маю вас відпустити, бо я пообіцяла про це. Також маю закінчувати сьогоднішню.
Thank you so much. I need to wrap up today. And as for the questions that we had in the chat, I'm really happy that we have this information in the chat, these question and answers. I see that Rudolf has answered those questions that were aimed at him. I also understand that as far as I understand, I'll be able to provide the information from our speakers. We will send to you all the guidelines that were presented here. And also, we will share those links that were proposed by our colleagues. I would also like to pay attention to comment to Rodolphe, and I would like to tell it. It is very important for Ukrainians today. When we talk about the war in Ukraine, it is important to use the word war and not crisis. That is why we would really like you to use the words war and Russian aggression in order to tell the truth about what is happening right now in Ukraine, in order to overcome this aggression, to fight this aggression that is rages all over our country. That is why we would be really, really grateful if you would use this terminology. It is very important to us. Thank you. Are there any questions? So this is the last opportunity to ask them. So Hubert, over to you.
I have a bit comment and question after mostly Rudolph's presentation, but maybe somehow the presentation of I have forgotten the name about the rivers of Vinica, about the interest of people, how you manage to attract the common view, because it is often I have also the experience with participation that it is harder to get to wider public. And I know the recommendation I have put in the interview, which is unfortunately in Polish, that someone, when there is local community and even they do not want to talk with the city hall or the architects, there is a way to go to somebody with whom they would like to speak and who would like to speak with us and ask for arranging the meeting. For example, this woman in Lublin, there was a district where she asked the local priest to invite people there, and then when they get to know them, the next meeting were easy. But sometimes, especially I was making the participation process for the square in the very city center, it was quite hard to attract the people apart from the circle of architects or the activists. So do you have experience how to make people the wide public comment be interested?
Дякую вам дуже за питання. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your questions. So the question was to Rudolf and to Yana. Rudolf, Yana, can you please share?
Можу розпочати я, поки я не бачу.
Well, I can start. I don't see if Rodolphe is here. Anyway, I didn't tell you a lot about the Institute of City Development during the presentation, but maybe partly it will answer your question. The Institute of City Development, this is a state enterprise, it is a state company, it makes part of the city mayor, but it consists mostly of city activists. Before starting to work in the city council, they have been very active as activists, from environment to recycling to urban studies, and right now they work within this institute. In our projects, we communicate with local residents, and of course, it looks completely different than when the city mayor does, when representatives of the local government do. Our approach is different. Our methods of participation are different. We try to look more as activists than as representatives of the official establishment. So probably this is the unique character of our institution and our approaches to participation. So this is the pre-story of our creation. Thank you, Jana. I don't know if Rodolphe is here with us right now.
Are you with us?
I am, yes.
So do we need to repeat the question? So the question was how. Тобто запитання було в тому, що ми
So the question was the following: how we can spark the interest of the general public, how we can engage them into public discussions if they seem not to be interested at first. How do we involve people? Hubert have quoted an example of Poland. In one case, they asked a local priest to reach out to the local community so they can get in touch with us and take involved in some kind of a communal project. So how do you do that?
Was this for me, yeah? I hope I understood it right. But you asked one more time if I'd give the wrong answer. We, for example, always when we have a church nearby, we always contacted them to have them for example, in the where I showed you where we did a small square as a pilot project, we invited the priest from the church to our literature circle. And the request was that everybody's reading something from the library nearby, because there also was a library on that square, chooses a book. So we all went to the library, everybody chose a book, and everybody read something from it. And he, of course, wanted to read from the Bible. It didn't work because he didn't read, but he held a preach there, and it took a bit longer. But at least he was involved, and it worked. But it worked it was very uncomplicated process, very informal. I'm not sure I answered it the right thing now.
So it was the answer. Yes. Thank you.
Але я хотіла ще додати, дякую дуже, Рудольф, хотіла додати ще...
Thank you so much for your answer. Thank you so much for your answer. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, can you hear it? I would like to add to the experience that Rodolphe has shared in Western Ukraine, at least in those projects that I participated. They actively use the opportunity to reach out to the community by church. In other projects, we also involved political activists, environmental activists, opinion leaders, so they can invite other people to take part in the project. They explained why it is important. We had a project in communities in different hromadas of Ukraine, where we asked participants who took part in development of the community to record short motivational videos, why they take part in this project, why it is valuable, and to distribute those videos in social media. In Ukraine, it works quite well. There are different invitations by opinion leaders in social media. When they explain to the public why it is important, it helps engage more people. So I hope that I also helped answer your question. There were a lot of links in the chat where you can get acquainted with different communication strategies and so on and so forth. I would like to thank each and everyone for your participation, for the opportunity to pay attention to us today. So today we will discuss communication and informing. Next time we will discuss those projects and documentation about projects related to recovery of Ukraine. We will discuss the legislation, the legal framework, and we will also add information from the point of view of those communities that have started the projects on recovery. We will discuss involvement in those projects, and we will also raise important issues which are relevant. During our next meetings, we will discuss involvement and engagement of vulnerable categories of people, how to create inclusive spaces through the projects of participation. We will pay attention to the processes of social cohesion and social integration, which will be very important for Ukraine. We will also have an event dedicated to the processes of participation and participatory projects, creating shared memory within projects related to memory and to working with heritage. And of course, we will continue discussing different tools of interaction and cooperation using the experience of Ukraine and using the experience of our international partners and colleagues. Thank you so much for being with us today, and see you later. See you next week. Ivan, maybe you would like to add something to end? So thank you so much and see you next Thursday. Thank you.